Imagine NASA discovers a computer buried beneath the surface of Mars. It is sealed inside rock. No footprints, no spacecraft, no clue how it arrived. Then they press the power button, it turns on and begins speaking perfect English. What would every scientist on Earth immediately conclude? Someone made it. They might argue about who made it, when it was made, or how it works, but nobody would look at the code, the circuitry, and the intelligence coming from the machine and say, give the Martian dust enough time, maybe it assembled itself. The intelligence inside the machine would point to an intelligence outside the machine. And that raises an uncomfortable question. Why do we immediately recognize design behind artificial intelligence, but hesitate to recognize it behind human intelligence? To answer that fairly, we need to understand what AI actually is, where its apparent intelligence comes from, and what separates a machine that can talk about life from a person who is alive. Here is what makes modern AI so fascinating. Its creators do not program every response it will ever give. An ordinary computer program follows explicit instructions. If this happens, do that. A developer can often trace an output back through the exact rules that produced it. But a large language model is built differently. Engineers design a neural network, an enormous mathematical system containing layers of adjustable numerical values called parameters, or weights. At first, those values are largely unhelpful. The model does not begin with a little dictionary in its head, or a library of finished answers. Instead, text is broken into smaller pieces called tokens. A token might be a word, part of a word, punctuation, or even a space. Those tokens are converted into numbers the network can process. Then the model receives a simple assignment: predict what token comes next. The stars were shining in the... Maybe it predicts kitchen. The correct answer in the training example is sky. The system calculates how wrong that prediction was. Then an algorithm called backpropagation adjusts the model's weights very slightly to make a better prediction next time. This happens again and again across immense amounts of text and enormous numbers of calculations. No engineer types in a rule saying, when discussing stars, sound poetic. The model gradually learns statistical relationships within language. But notice what was present before the model learned anything. A designed architecture, human-produced data, a defined objective, enormous computing infrastructure, and engineers directing the entire process. The answers are not individually scripted, but the learning system is still intentionally made. At this point, you might be thinking, wait, ChatGPT can explain physics, translate Latin, debug code, and write a wedding toast. How can all of that come from predicting the next piece of text? Because predicting language well is far more demanding than it sounds. To finish a detective story, a model must track characters, clues, motives, and cause and effect. To complete a line of computer code, it must pick up patterns in programming languages and logic. To answer a history question, it must absorb relationships among people, places, events, and dates, represented throughout its training material. Modern language models generally use an architecture called a transformer. Its defining mechanism, attention, helps the network weigh which earlier tokens are most relevant to the token it is producing now. Consider this sentence: the trophy did not fit inside the suitcase because it was too large. What was too large, the trophy or the suitcase? Probably the trophy. Attention helps the model use the surrounding context to represent that relationship. Multiply that kind of contextual pattern finding across many layers, huge datasets, and vast numbers of parameters, and the model can develop remarkably general abilities. Some capabilities surprise even the engineers. They designed the training process, but they do not manually specify every internal pattern the model would learn. That is important. Surprise is not the same thing as absence of design. A composer can build a wind chime without determining the exact sequence of every note the wind will produce. The unexpected melody does not mean the chime built itself. In the same way, AI can produce outputs its developers never predicted, while remaining completely dependent on a system they intentionally constructed. But next token prediction alone does not automatically create a helpful assistant. A base model trained on text is learning to continue patterns. If you type a question, it might answer it, but it might also continue by inventing 3 more questions, because it has seen documents formatted that way. So developers use additional stages called post-training. People provide examples of desirable answers. Human reviewers, or in some systems, other models guided by human-written criteria, compare possible responses. The model is then adjusted to become more helpful, accurate, safe, and responsive to instructions. Developers test it, they search for failures, they change the data, the objectives, the safeguards, or the surrounding system. Even after release, models are evaluated and improved. So when an AI assistant politely answers your question, you are seeing layers of human intention. Humans designed the hardware, humans designed the architecture, humans produced and selected the information used in training, humans defined what counted as a better prediction, and humans helped shape what counted as a better answer. Artificial intelligence is not intelligence appearing from nothing. It is human ingenuity building a machine that learns patterns from the products of other human minds. Behind artificial intelligence, we keep finding intelligence. So, is AI becoming a person? AI clearly represents complex patterns. It can combine ideas in new ways. It can solve some problems it was never explicitly shown how to solve. We should not minimize what engineers have accomplished, but fluent language can tempt us to assume there is a human-like inner life behind the words. An AI can say, "I am afraid." That sentence alone does not prove it feels fear. It can describe the taste of an orange without ever tasting one. It can write a prayer without worshiping. It can compose a eulogy without grieving the person who died. It can explain pain without having a body that hurts. Its language about human experience comes from patterns in data produced by people who actually lived those experiences. And even when an AI gives a confident, beautifully written answer, it can still be false. Its fundamental task is to produce a fitting continuation, not to bear moral responsibility for telling the truth. Humans can lie, of course, but we understand that we ought to tell the truth. We can be guilty for deceiving someone. A machine can generate a false sentence. A person can commit an act of dishonesty. That gap between producing moral language and being a moral agent is not small. AI can imitate the linguistic surface of personhood with astonishing skill, but imitation should not be confused with identity. Here is where AI becomes more than a technology story. It becomes a mirror. What did we use to make it? We gave it an architecture designed by human reason. We trained it on human language. We filled it with traces of our science, stories, music, arguments, humor, cruelty, compassion, wisdom, and sin. In a limited sense, We made AI in our image, not as a living person, not as an equal, but as an artifact that reflects characteristics of its makers. It uses our words, it reproduces our patterns, it displays our brilliance and inherits our distortions. The resemblance is real precisely because the dependence is total. AI did not invent the concept of artificial intelligence. It did not choose to exist. It did not build the electrical grid powering its computers. It did not create the human beings whose knowledge became its training material. Its abilities point backward to its makers, and that makes the opening words of the Bible newly striking. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." Human beings also reflect their maker, but at an incomparably higher level. We reason because God is rational. We create because God is creator. We recognize moral obligation because good and evil are grounded beyond our preferences. We form relationships because ultimate reality is not impersonal. Our abilities do not make us gods. They identify us as creatures made to reflect God. And perhaps nothing displays that reflection more vividly than this. The creatures God made have now begun making things that faintly imitate the intelligence He gave them. There is also a crucial difference between engineers making AI and God creating human beings. We create derivatively, God creates sovereignly. Engineers begin with materials they did not make: silicon, metals, electricity, mathematics, human language. Every AI is assembled within a universe already filled with order and information. God is not an engineer working with someone else's universe. Genesis presents him as the source of the universe itself. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We build machines by arranging existing matter. God speaks creation into being. We train AI by exposing it to millions or billions of examples. Genesis does not picture Adam slowly absorbing a dataset until he becomes human. God forms man from the dust and breathes into him the breath of life. AI receives a statistical model of words connected to love. God creates beings capable of loving him and one another. AI has parameters. A human being has a body and soul, relationships and obligations, dignity and purpose. AI is made to serve human purposes. Humanity is made to know God, represent His rule within creation, love what is good, and care for the world He made. And Scripture does not ground human value in intelligence. That matters enormously. An infant, a person with profound disabilities, and a brilliant scientist do not possess different degrees of the image of God. Human dignity is not a score earned through cognitive performance. It is a status given by our Creator. If intelligence alone determined value, a smarter machine might someday become more valuable than a person. Christianity says no. A machine may exceed you in calculation and still never become an image bearer. Your worth rests not in outperforming it, but in the God whose image you bear. Now, we should be careful with the argument. The fact that AI has a creator is not, by itself, a laboratory proof that God exists. A skeptic can reply that machines and organisms have different histories, and that biological complexity developed through natural processes. That objection deserves more than a slogan. But appealing to a natural process does not remove the deepest question. It just moves it back. Why is there a universe with stable laws capable of producing life? Why is nature mathematically intelligible to minds? How does physical matter give rise to consciousness? The private reality of seeing color, feeling pain, or loving another person. Why do human beings experience moral duties as more than personal taste? And why can our minds discover truth about a universe we did not create? AI does not settle these questions. It makes them harder to ignore. Because the closer our imitation of intelligence becomes, the more clearly we see how much is required to produce even the imitation. Information, order, fine-tuning, power, selection, correction, purpose. The analogy is not the whole case for God. It is an invitation to recover a rational instinct we use everywhere else. Meaningful order calls for explanation, and Christianity does not merely say that some generic intelligence started the universe. It says the source of reality is the living God who created, intentionally, and who made human beings so that they could know Him. Artificial intelligence may become one of the most powerful tools humanity has ever built. It may help us discover medicines, understand languages, create art, and solve problems we cannot yet imagine. It may also amplify deception, pride, exploitation, and our desire to replace wisdom with power. Like every human creation, it will reflect the kind of creatures we are. But perhaps AI's most important lesson is not about the future of machines. It is about the origin and purpose of humanity. An AI can process the sentence, "The heavens declare the glory of God," but you can look into the heavens and feel their glory. An AI can explain what it means to confess sin, but you can actually repent and be forgiven. An AI can summarize the words of Jesus, but Jesus did not die to reconcile machines to God. He entered human history to redeem human beings, fallen image bearers who were made by Him and for Him. We built AI to answer our questions, and now AI turns one back on us. If artificial intelligence points so obviously to the minds that made it, what does human intelligence point to? You are not merely a biological computer processing inputs. You are not an accident waiting to be replaced by a better machine. You are a creature made in the image of God, and the mind that created artificial intelligence should lead us to ask about the mind that created us.